Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. O blessed sons of Bretonia, let the lady's light guide you through these dark times as the undead stir from the depths of the sea. So we have Bretonia versus the Vampire Coast in this Warhammer World Championship matchup between Felkon on the Bretonians and Imperator will be commanding the undead. So for the front line, it is going to be peasant mobs for Bretonia. They are going to be backed up by a very heavy mobile core as well. We do have a couple of men-at-arms sitting in that secondary line, and then we do have a couple of peasant bowmen with pox arrows just getting that poison on the field. We do have a couple of field trebuchets as well, just getting some nice little DPS, trying to potentially outtrade some of the coast artillery themselves. But yeah, we are going to be having quite a few knights errant spread across the field. And then, of course, we do have the Fey enchantments. We also do have some Grail Knights as well. Kind of swing on in. Kind of an interesting pick, seeing some very expensive cav, especially with the artillery and like all the handguns that the coast do have. It can be a very risky picking these guys, but if they are able to stay nice and healthy, and of course they do have that magical damage as well, which is going to be very helpful against some of the ethereal units if they do bring like sirens, or if for something like that. For example, we do have Knights of the Lionheart as well for some additional magic damage, and then we do have the Fey Enchantress going to be coming on in. She does have her looks like we have Earthblood, and then there is going to be the Awakening of the Wood. She does have that Favor of the Fae and the Chalice of Potions, giving that bound Comet of Casadora. She will be protected by a couple of flying paladins, one of which is going to be rocking that Guardian ability, giving that additional physical resist to those Lords and Heroes. And that is pretty much going to wrap things up then for Bretonia. Very heavy cav. It's pretty common seeing, especially Felkon, going that route with all of that mobility, really kind of overwhelming his opponent. And then for Imperator and the Vampire Coast, it is going to be Zombie Power Deckhand mobs with polearms for that front line. And we do have Clylostra, Direfin. Definitely a fun, interesting pick here. We're not even going to be seeing any of that lore of vampires here. It is all going to be lore of the deep. So we do have Tide Call. We have Denizens of the Deep getting that rotting Promethean summons. And then we do have the Song of Enthrallment, minus 24 melee attack, minus 48% speed. And then there is going to be the Ghosts of the Past getting the summon of the Damned Knights Errant, getting plenty of ethereal units. But unfortunately, those Grail Knights and Knights of the Lionhearted going to have a thing or two to say about those guys, and especially with 3 sirens as well. So some even additional magic damage. That physical resist is going to be getting cut through pretty effectively by those magical attacks from those knights. So they are going to have to try and stay nice and safe behind these rotting Prometheans, one of which is going to be the Lamprey's Revenge, the Gunnery Mob ROR. So they do have regen themselves. And then there is going to be another rotting Promethean sitting in that back line. But that is going to be it for the coast. A very straightforward army. There is actually one more Scurvy Dog, as 2 of those on the flanks for that mobility. But just not going to be enough mobility, I think. So we're going to get things rolling on in as the artillery going to be laying waste to the approaching vampire pirates here. Going to be moving on forward. And the shot's going to be making some decent connections, but I mean, it is just going to be polearms after all, and those trebuchets not going to be doing a whole lot to those sirens. They do lack that magic damage with those trebuchets, so they're not going to be able to really get a whole lot of damage out on them. And bringing down Clylostra is going to be a little tough nut to be cracking, but of course those Grail Knights going to be providing a lot of help with that, especially considering there isn't a whole lot of gun units here for this army. All of these Knights Errant, the Grail Knights, are going to have a lot easier time just kind of cycle charging in and out with this fight. They don't have to worry about just getting shot to pieces. Those Lamprey's Revenge is going to be a bit of a pain for them to get deal with, because they do have those guns. This is going to be the only source of gunpowder for this army as they slowly make their way forward. And at this point, they have almost completely conceded the mobility game. Both of the Scurvy Dogs have retreated into their own lines. Going to be trying to keep them safe and just not let them get pulled apart here. We do get a nice charge in from the Knights Errant, the Knights of the Lionhearted into this one flank, trying to get as much free damage as they can, as the Vampire Coast do try to respond to that charge, trying to get their own counter charge into these guys. But now we do have some more Knights Errant coming in from the rear, looking to get that nice rear charge in, as we do have an Awakening of the Wood doing some nice magical damage, as those Sirens have just taken a ton of damage so far, because there is a plenty of magic damage. I mean, the Awakening of the Wood alone is a very good tool to deal with the Sirens, but when you get the Knights of Lionheart and Grail Knights, it is going to make it all the more difficult. Both of the Paladins are going to be jumping onto Colossal Diaphragm, trying to get as much damage in. It looks like we do have that Chalice of Potions going to be dropping down right into the middle of the Lamprey's Revenge. We do get a summon of the Damned Knights Errant, but these Knights Errant are going to be going right up against their damned cousins, as they do get that charge in against them. We do get a Rotting Promethean summon as well, so there's plenty of summons now on the field for the Vampire Coast, just trying to bog down all of the cavalry that they can. Knights of Lionheart have been starting to take quite a bit of damage, and those are one of the units that definitely that Coast would like to get rid of as quickly as they can. In addition to those Grail Knights, Grail Knights are going to be a lot harder. Speaking of Grail Knights, though, away they are going. Grail Knights do end up getting routed off, so they can get rid of that magic damage. That is going to be a major plus for the Vampire Coast. Balance power is still pretty much dead even here, as the Scurvy Dogs just holding back these Knights Errant, and just as these Rotting Prometheans are just keeping going throughout all of this. These guys are starting to get a little bit beat down, and Colostra herself is taking a lot of damage, and there is no healing for the Vampire Coast here today. It is just going to be that Lore of the Deep. So she is going to have to make do with what she gets. She's going to be getting another one of those Rotting Prometheans summons right into the middle of all this, trying to get rid of the Fae, because the Fae is that last source of magic damage, in addition to those two Knights of Lionheart and those Grail Knights. So that is going to be getting rid of those 3 units is probably going to be the Coast priority here, though the Bretonnia is pulling ahead in that balance of power, as more and more of all the ethereal units are getting beaten down, and Colostra is taking quite a bit of damage that she is not going to be able to heal through, and all of the Peasant Bowmen, for example, are now starting to be free to fire. The Grail Knights, though, are just taking a ton of damage from these Rotting Prometheans. They are just standing tall against this very elite and expensive Cav unit. I don't know if this Cav unit is quite going to be able to pay for itself. It has earned itself a couple chevrons, though, so it might be able to be doing some decent damage throughout all of these big, massive crab units and their high armor. Where the Sirens really are just getting completely whittled down just bit by bit. I mean, the Fae herself is going to be draining all of these units herself when she is in melee. So that is just going to be adding to all that damage that is getting racked up. We are going to be losing that Rotting Promethean summon, as there's just a bunch of dead crabs here just littered across the field. Going to be providing some roadblocks for the Bretonnian cavalry, even with their shells just kind of resting amongst the ground, as these finally the Lamprey's Revenge is starting to get things done. But Imperator is going to be conceding, though, seeing just how much is left for Bretonnia. And that is going to be it for game 1. So let's take a look at that after battle report. We'll update the scorecard as well, as Felkon does take that first game. I mean, he really did pretty much have a hard counter to what Imperator had brought. Imperator's trying to just do a cheeky little rush for the Vampire Coast. So definitely not something you'd be expecting to be seeing from Coast. Definitely probably expecting like cannons, gun lines, at least some kind of handgunners and stuff like that. Potentially some flying units, Noctilus potentially on his Colossus, but instead going for that rush and trying to take Felkon by surprise. But Felkon had a surprise of his own with those Grail Knights, getting 1,300 on them. So again, not quite doing what their cost is, but still having that magic damage. Without them and the Knights of Lionhearted, these Sirens would have been a lot harder to deal with, because the Fae could only cast so many Awakening of the Woods throughout that battle to really try and deal with them. But with all 3 of those sources, all 3 of those Sirens really were kind of a mute point in this fight. Scurvy Dogs as well, they're just way too overwhelmed. I think, like, Scurvy Dogs with this particular type of army, I think you just have to kind of concede that mobility game just completely, because if you do bring them, that just 1,000 gold just pretty much going to be wasted, because Bretonnia is going to be bringing cavalry. That is kind of one of their ways that they can really deal with coast anyways. It's just like spamming, like Knights Errant, for example, pretty cheap cavalry, just trying to get into those gun lines, trying to shut them down that way. And then if you do have guns to support the Scurvy Dogs, they're really good at chasing things off, or you have to be very, very careful at just keeping them away from cav the whole game and only using them when things do get routed, or potentially just vanguarding them into the corners and just trying to go after the trebuchets at that point. Otherwise, I mean, some of the Zombie Empire deck ammo actually did some decent work. This one got 720. All of the Prometheans, they were just kind of there as a roadblock, did okay. The Lampreys Revenge, on the other hand, did do very well. 1,500, able to do a lot of damage to those Grail Knights, so very good on that. And then Calastra getting 1,200 herself. This is kind of just one of the things, though. The lore of vampires is just very, very good, and is why you almost always will be seeing it on the coast side, even if you do have to bring your own vampire caster to do it. Just having those heals, those summons, just invaluable, especially against a faction with a lot of heavy mobility. You need those guns to really just lock them down. Rest of the forces on the Bretonnian side, trebuchets did quite well. And then the rest of the Knights Errant, they did okay, but not really all too nothing to write home about. The two peasant bowmen, kind of as always, are going to be getting some nice, decent value between them, and then just the rest of the Bretonnians are just kind of there. The Paladins doing some good work there. These guys getting 600. Again, just they had full health though at the end, so they really had quite a bit of potential left, and they did quite a number onto Calastra, so she wasn't able to really stay nice and healthy as she wanted to. And the Fae getting 2,500. Draining all of those Awakening in the Woods, doing a ton of damage to those Sirens, and even the Chalice of Potions doing quite well indeed. But that is going to be it for game one. Felkon does take it, so he does take that early lead, so let's roll on into game two. The Realms of Men are going to be once again defending the land against the Restless Dead, this time as the Empire faces off against the Tomb King. So Felkon will be commanding the forces of the Empire, and Imperator does have the Tomb Kings on his side for this game. So for the Empire's forces, we do have Spearmen mixed in with the Sigmar Sons and Flagellants for that front line. Just pretty much is going to be state troops and a few unbreakable units to hold that center ranks. We do have a couple more Spearmen and a Halberdier in the back, and we're protecting these great cannons, and there's going to be some Empire Knights as well for that mobility to help kind of charge out of the forest against anything that is going to be threatening those cannons. And they do have some decent line of sight for a while until the Tomb Kings are able to hit this ridge over on the other side. But in the meantime, there is going to be plenty of ranged skirmish cav for the Empire going to be harassing the Tomb Kings, as we do have 3 regular Outriders, and we are also going to have one of the Outriders with the grenade launchers, which do very well against the like the just cheap infantry and the low armored, tightly packed infantry of the Tomb Kings. They'll do a ton of good work there at clearing them out. For the Lord, it is going to be Marcus Wolfart. He is going to be rolling in with that Hunter's Snare and the Amber Bow. Going to be just trying to snipe out his prey here with those large constructs, and be providing an excellent target for his bow. Just going to be laying shots in all game. And we do have a bright wizard going to be coming in with Fireball and Burning Head. Going to be looking to roast and toast some of those scaly boys. And we do have one more Empire Knight in that far back, just for a little bit of extra mobility, cheap mobility in and of itself. You don't really need anything too outlandish to be dealing with it. The only thing you're really going to be worrying about is Nehekron Horsemen. And for the Tomb Kings, that is going to be one of those units on the field. There's going to be a pair of Nehekron Horsemen on the field, one on each flank. And then there is going to be, for the front line, just some Skeleton Spears mixed in with some Nehekron Warriors, though. The Nehekron Warriors going to be very good at dealing with the Empire Chaff. However, they are going to be very susceptible to ranged attacks, as those Outriders and those grenade launchers are just going to be doing a ton of damage to these guys, and they definitely would like to close that distance as quickly as possible. And in support for them, they do have 3 Ushapti. Going to be a lot harder to bring down. However, those Outriders should be up to the task, as well as those great cannons. And there's going to be then 3 skeleton archers, one of which is the Blessed Legion, which does have armor sundering, so that will help in those cav engagements, reducing that armor, allowing those Nehekron horsemen to do even better work against them. We have some regular skeleton warriors in the back, some roaming skeleton chariots, and then for the Lord, it is going to be Cetra, the Imperishable. He's going to be up on his War Sphinx, and Cetra is going to be bringing the Curse, as well as Unwielding Will, which will give +5 melee attack and melee defense in an AoE. We have the Jaf's Incantation of Cursed Blades, we have Daru's Incantation of Protection, and then we also have Usep's Incantation of Desiccation, in case there is going to be any blob fights. But I think with how both armies are looking, that is going to be an unnecessary use there. I don't think there's going to be anything lending to one of those big blob fights where you definitely need that debuff. And then there's the Blessed Blade of Patra, which gives fire damage, -30% accuracy, -24 melee defense, and melee attack, which is going to be more useful here than that fire attacks for this fight. But let's get things rolling, as a Burning Head already going to be roasting down these skeleton archers, just missing the start of that cast. But man, that is going to be one unit already completely disintegrating, and it is going to be continuing right down the line and is going to be just clipping the edge of these Necron warriors, though it is going to be then continuing off into the trees as the rest of the Tomb Kings are going to be advancing. These Necron horsemen have already taken a ton of damage so far. Those shots from those Outriders and those Outriders with grenade launchers already taken their toll on the Tomb King roster, as the Tomb Kings are going to be trying to rush as quickly as they can, trying to get into this backline. And the Necron horsemen do get around the back and are able to jump on top of these great cannons. However, there is just going to be a ton of units here to counteract that. These halberdiers of those Empire Knights. However, in the meantime, these great cannons might still end up routing to these Necron horsemen. Those horsemen are going to be a tough nut to get out of there once they have been gotten on top of the great cannons. And we do get a net from Cetra the Imperishable, or on top of Cetra the Imperishable, from Marcus Wolfhart, and that is going to allow all of these Outriders to just light him up, though these skeleton chariots are doing a nice bit of work just kind of bogging down as many of the Outriders as possible, so you're really not getting as much focus fire as Cetra may have otherwise be seeing. So a little luck on that side, and now he is going to be able to charge right on in. Can be going for this Bright Wizard by the looks of things, as we do get that Amber Bow going through, and it looks like it is going to be getting blocked by a few of those chariots along the way. And here is actually an Incantation of Desiccation by the looks of things, going to be getting that debuff, so -24 melee attack and melee defense to everything in this little area here. Just going to be allowing the Tomb Kings to just break them down as quickly as they can, especially these two unbreakable units. They are hitting the Sigmar Sons and the Flagellants point blank, and it does look like those great cannons were able to survive and push back those Necron horsemen, as the Empire gun line is just opening up on Cetra, taking him down already to 50% health, and Marcus Wolfhart as well is just continuing just to range shots in, as the bounce power already showing quite in favor of the Empire here in the early stages of this fight. And the Outriders with grenade launchers as well, just decimating these Necron warriors here, doing a little bit of friendly fire to the Flagellants, but both sides are pretty much unbreakable, so really just trying to get rid of those Necron warriors. And yeah, Cetra is just getting lit up, as we do have an Empire captain as well, just kind of keeping him occupied, and all of these Outriders. The Tomb Kings just don't have enough things, and we do get another Burning Head. This time going to be going right through these Skeleton Archers and through these Skeleton Spearmen as well. Going to be taking both of those guys down a peg or two, and Cetra is not going to be surviving much longer. There is going to be no running from Marcus Wolfhart's bow at this point, as well as all of these Outriders, and his days are numbered, as he will once again return to the sands, as down he does go. And the rest of the Tomb King army, I think, is going to be following fairly shortly. They just don't have the stopping power, and Imperator, seeing that, is going to be conceding, just as he is going to be dropping that Ushabti summon. But unfortunately, the matchups did not play too kindly for Imperator, as Felkon is going to be taking the series 2-0. So let's take a look at how things did shake out on both sides. So for the Tomb Kings, I'm not really expecting too much great value here. The Ushabti actually did do pretty decent, because they still had all of their models left at the end of that fight. So they were able to kind of outlast, because all of that damage from the Empire was focused pretty much solely on Cetra. All of those Outriders, there were just so many gun units. They just needed some more units. I think some like Carrion, and just maybe a little bit more mobility would have been nice to have. Maybe drop one of the Ushabti, go for a little bit wider for the Necron Horsemen, add a Carrion here or there, and I think that would have been very helpful in helping screen out those Outriders, because they had pretty much free reign to do what they wanted. especially with the Empire Knights there to just, once those Necron Horsemen did put pressure on, they could just push them back and then allow those Outriders to really do a ton of work with that. Rest of the units not really doing all too hot here. Some of those Burning Heads really did do quite the number to the Tomb Kings. Cetra very lackluster in that fight, was really unable to get onto any of the targets he wanted to. Great Cannon as well kind of got shut down, didn't really have the best line of sight anyways. I mean, this map just doesn't lend well to using the Great Cannon. That hill just doesn't allow that direct fire to provide much in terms of value. Outriders with grenade launchers getting some nice work with 844 on those guys, and then all of the regular Outriders getting almost 1,000 per unit. These guys only got 600, but yeah, all of them doing a ton of damage. Pretty much all of it was directed solely towards Cetra, taking down the big kitty, as he does have, like, he costs like 3k when he is on his War Sphinx, especially when he is bringing 3 of those spells. And then the Empire Knights just there to, again, just screen things out. They weren't really there for their damage, just kind of making sure the things that needed to stay safe stayed safe. Frontline did hold in the end, and then for the rest of the state troops, not really going to be expecting too much out of them. And then the Bright Wizard as well was that other unit that did a ton of damage, able to have some beautiful burning heads, going to be getting through all of those archers, able to eliminate one of them before they were even able to fire a single shot, then taken out another in that late game. And even Marcus Wolfhart was able to contribute quite a bit of damage in this fight, getting 1,100 on him, and he did have some very nice targets to be shooting at, with, I mean, Cetra the Imperishable being target number 1, and that net did help. It kept Cetra out of his units for a little bit longer, but yeah, all of his Outriders really weren't able to get as much focus fire at that point, but later in the match they definitely did prosper quite well. But that is going to be it for the series. Felkon does take the series 2-0 in rather convincing fashion, kind of proving he is quite on top of his game at this time. So it'll be fun seeing how he does progress through the rest of the finals. This is from the group stage, though. This is not from the final 64-man bracket. However, both of these players is in that bracket, so it'll be stay in tune on both of these guys. Both of them are very good players. Imperator did just get a little unlucky with all of the builds, so that is kind of how things do go from time to time. That's all I'm going to have for today. I do hope you enjoy the video, and as always, have a good one.